Our Clinic 2 tape involves two phases of offensive play. First of all, we're going to show how we tried to develop fundamental play against man-to-man offense. Our regular offense is the basis for all of our offensive play. The other alignments that we use against man-to-man offense, everything that we do against zones, matchups, presses, either full or half court, comes out of our basic regular offense. We don't have an offense that involves patterns. I don't believe in teaching plays. I believe in teaching kids how to play. I think it's our objective to teach our players to be able to read the defense. The defense can take away certain things from any offense, and I believe it can take away more things from patterned offense by far than from non-patterned offense. It only stands to reason in my mind that if the offense knows what it's going to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, the defense can very quickly adjust to the same rhythm and the same pattern and take away those things in a 1, 2, 3, 4 offense. We're going to try and show all of the fundamental work we put into our offensive play against man-to-man defense. How we set up cuts, screens, the options that we have as we read what the defense tries to do against those things that are basic parts of our man-to-man offense. We feel that if we can teach players how to play rather than teach them plays, then the defense that we're going to play against is going to have a much tougher time adjusting to us. Because if things are taken away from us, then we have other things that we can very quickly do or can really automatically do because our players are able to read what the defense is doing against us. The very first thing that we try to teach in our offensive play is a V cut. We think that it's extremely important that every cut we make is set up with a V. We're going to set a movement that takes us about 8 feet or maybe 3 steps in a direction away from our cut. Then our cut is going to be made directly toward the basketball. Wherever the basketball is, we want to make the cut in that direction. Then we will combine this cut, as we'll show in a moment, with screening. The V cut, set your man up away from the direction you're going and then move toward the basketball. Now, we have a basic thought in our cutting. First of all, if the defense is playing us even or toward the baseline, we're going to try and take the defensive man further toward the baseline and then cut up to the basketball. However, if the defensive man should be playing above us, then we're going to try and take that defensive man even higher, still keeping a V cut, and cut behind him to the basket. So the V cut can be made in either direction, taking the defense toward the baseline if we're being played even or below, or if we're being played high, taking the defense high and then cutting toward the basket. The first thing we add to the cut is the down screen. And we want to make sure that our down screen is set at a very particular and precise angle. Our cutter is going to make the V cut coming toward the basketball. Our screener must set the screen on an angle so that his back is turned to the basketball. We have the basketball up in this area somewhere. The down screen is set so the cutter comes off the screen, moving directly toward the pass that he's going to be receiving from this area. A lot of times screeners come in at an angle that allows the defensive man to come on the man side of the screen, or an angle that allows the defensive man to move quickly on the ball side of the screen. The teaching point is to have the screen set directly with the back to the ball. The cutter then must come off the screen in such a way that he touches some part of the screener. They touch shoulders, they touch hips, they touch arms. This eliminates any room right here for the defensive man playing the cutter to come through the screen. We like to set the screen in such a way that as we move into the screen, we're in a very stationary way with our arms locked. And to lock our arms, we want to make sure that we hold our right wrist with the left hand, as I'm showing here, in setting the screen. We come into the screening position, locked into position, and it eliminates us sticking an arm out or sliding to one side or the other and picking up a block with the screen. Our feet are as wide as our hips, hands locked in front of the body, and now we're in a great position to set the effective kind of a screen that must be set in order to give the cutter an opportunity to come off the screen free to receive the basketball. The options for the cutter off the down screen are these. But before showing the options, let me stress how important it is that the offensive cutter be reading what the defensive man does. And I think we'll be able to illustrate that by going through those options for the cutter. The screen has already been set. The cutter has made the V cut, and he's ready to come off the screen moving toward the basketball. 2 will be our cutter. A will be the defensive man playing right here. First of all, we want to make sure that an offensive cutter is reading the defensive man, not watching the basketball. And this is an incredibly important point to teach offensive players. Too many players get caught up with the basketball, and they're watching the basketball instead of reading the defensive man. I'm about to make a cut, and I'm looking at the basketball to see if it's going to be delivered, where it's going to be delivered, and I make a cut that takes me right into whatever the defensive man is doing. If I'm reading the defensive man, the ball will take care of itself if I make the right cut off this screen. Then it's up to the man with the ball to make the delivery to me as I get open. The defensive man comes right into the screen. The offensive man who has set up that cut can then continue coming right toward the basketball. We feel that there will be enough time for the defensive man, or created by the defensive man, getting around this screen for the offensive man to receive the basketball and set up the shot, the drive, or a possible feed inside. Now, if the defensive man were to try to fight through the gap between the cut and the screen, the option that we want the offensive cutter to take is what we refer to as a tight cut, which comes right over top into the lane. Our thought here is that we pinch the defensive man right here, and now we move toward the basket. If the defensive man tries to go on the basket side of the screen, then that gives another option to the cutter, and that's popping right back from the screen and setting up for the shot that will result in the pass coming over the top from the ball to the cutter, who has popped back while the defensive man takes himself away from the play. Now, the fourth option would exist if, in making the cut, the defensive man somehow manages to get up on top of the offensive man. When this happens, we want the offensive man to continue with his set and cut to the basket in a back cut. So there will be 4 options that are available to any cutter coming off a down screen. And those options are, after setting up the cut, a straight cut to the ball looking for the shot. The defensive man has gotten hung up on the screen. The defensive man tries to slide through the gap, and we make a tight cut coming right over top of the screen. Thirdly, the defensive man tries to go basket side of the screen, and the cutter simply pops back away from that defensive man for a pass over the top, setting himself up for the jump shot. And fourthly, the defensive man gets above the cutter, and now he takes him into the screen and makes a quick cut to the basket in a back cut. Cutter has to read the defensive man, not watch the basketball. Our second basic combination of cutting and screening is coming off the back pitch. A moment ago, we showed a poor angle for a down screen. What many times is a poor angle for a down screen is an excellent angle for a back screen. We set the bottom man here, the top man here. Now, if we've got a really good shooter in this position, we're going to try and adjust in such a way that he is going to come out and we're going to come in from on top so we can improve the angle of the down screen, trying to set up the shot for the bottom man. If, however, there's no great difference in the shooting ability, we have an angle that really enables us to set an excellent back screen. A basic rule of thumb is always this in the back screen. Just as in the down screen, the cutter must be outside the screen, so too in the back screen should the cutter be outside the screen. Except here, as you can see, the positions of screener and cutter are just inverted. With a down screen, the cutter is coming from the bottom, and with a back screen, many times the cutter is coming from the top, or if the postman were up a little higher or a man on the post, it's going to be a screen set almost in a lateral setup to the baseline. The screener is going to come up, and now he's going to set the screen in such a way that his back will be to the basket. On the down screen, we set the back up to the basketball. On the back screen, we set the back up to the basket. The screen will be set about 6 feet away from the defensive man, giving the cutter a chance to set up his cut. If the defensive man is playing on the low side of the cutter, he'll try and set him up lower and come over top of the screen, moving toward the lane. If the defensive man is playing even or above the cutter, then he'll try and set him a little higher and now come off the screen going toward the basket. The cutter has got to read the defensive man to make the proper set, which off the back screen will not be quite as long as the setup that we use to make the down screen. A variation cut for us off the back screen is a side flare. Here we have a situation where the screener sets the screen a little further away from the cutter. And the cutter starts the defensive man over top of the screen and then flares back toward the baseline. If we can get the defensive man to continue over the top and get caught up above the screen, the screener can then turn slightly, making it difficult for this defensive man to get back to our cutter going to an open area on the baseline. From wherever the ball is located, we want to pass over top of the screen to our cutter flaring to the baseline. This is an excellent option for us to use with an offensive cutter who is either a good shooter receiving the ball in an open area to take the shot, or a quick player who upon receiving the ball can make an immediate thrust to the basket. Setting up the cut and reading the defense, again, are the things that enable the cutter to get open, to have the opportunity to score. The back screen can be set anywhere on the floor. It could be set by a man stepping out from the high post to set the back screen, setting it up with his back to the basket. The cutter is going to read the defense and make his cut accordingly. There really is no set position on the court from which we will establish a cut off a back screen. We have two thoughts, however, that we want used in all of our back screening. Number one, the man setting the back screen does not move any further away from the basket than to a position from which he can still effectively shoot the ball. What we don't want to have is a postman or a center moving out on the floor, setting a back screen, and then receiving the ball himself in a position where he cannot shoot effectively. We limit our post players to setting screens at positions on the court from which, if they happen to receive the ball after the cut has been made, they can shoot effectively. The second thing that we try to do in setting up any kind of a back screen situation is we want anybody in the post to set up in a posting position wherever it might be for a count of two, then moving out to set the back screen when the ball has been reversed from that particular position. Here, we're trying to punch the ball inside. We hold the post position for a count of two. The ball can't go inside. It's reversed. We step out and set the back pick for the cutter to make his move to the basket. Setting the back screen against a defensive man in this position who is playing a feeder, who now becomes a cutter when he releases the ball, is a very, very effective automatic screen to have in your offense. The third of our basic screens is the cross screen. The cross screen occurs with a postman moving across the lane to set a screen away from the ball. It's set up with a postman who has established position for a feed from the side of the floor. He holds this position for a 2 count. If he doesn't receive the ball after a 2 count, he has one option that we've already discussed, and that's coming out and setting the back screen when the ball has been reversed from the side to the top of the key. The second option is holding his position, or upon seeing immediately that he's not going to get the ball, he can make a 3-part move. He turns, number 1. Number 2, he looks. And number 3, he sets the screen. Now, we're going to give the screener a little leeway in how he sets that screen. If you'll remember, on the down screen, we want the back to the ball. On the back screen, we want the back to the basket. Here, we're going to try and have the screener set the screen in such a way that it gives the cutter the best opportunity to come off the screen and get open to receive the basketball. We want the cutter receiving the cross screen to, as soon as the opposite postman makes his turn, to step 6 to 8 feet off the lane, giving him a chance to set up the cut. The defensive man playing our potential cutter is a little bit below the cutter. If this is the case, we want the screen set on an angle conducive to a high cut. If the defensive man should be a little bit higher, we'll put him in this position. Then we want the screener to read the defense and set the angle of the screen in such a way that the cutter now has a chance to make a low cut. The screener, after the cut has been made, will be stepping outside the lane to avoid the 3-second count on a high cut. On a low cut, the screener will be stepping quickly back to the lane to receive the pass in the event that both defensive players, at least momentarily, go with the cutter to the basket. When we talk about the combining of cutting and screening, we also have to include what we're going to do against the switch. Let's talk about the down screen, first of all. We have a cutter who has already set up the cut, a screener who is in screening position with his back to the basketball, a defensive player playing on the cutter, and a defensive player playing on the screener. If the cutter makes a straight cut toward the basketball, it's an ideal switch situation for the defensive man on the screener, who can step in on the cut, taking away the pass to the cutter, which is our primary objective of the cut off the down screen. We've got to be able to counter this particular switch of our down screen, and there are two basic ways that we work to counter this switch. The first counter is with the cutter making a false start over the screen and going to the basket. What we're hoping here is that the man switching to him will come off the top, switching to that low cut. That allows our screener to step right back toward the basketball, and now he is the person we're looking to hit. The cutter sets up the pass to the screener with a low cut. The first option against a switch of the down screen is a low cut and the screener stepping back to the ball. The second option against the switch of the down screen is for the screener to come into a screening position, hold it momentarily. As the cutter starts to make his move, he quickly slips to the basket. Our thought here is that as the top man sets up the switch to the cutter, the screener can move to the basket before the defensive man has a chance to prevent him from doing so. We call this the slip screen. When we're working against a switching defense in practice, we will tell the man with the basketball that he can only hit the screener. This is an offensive restriction that we put on our offense in order to set up the best working condition for going against the switch. We think against switching defense, the screener, not the cutter, is going to be our primary score. When the switch is used against our back screening, we want the cutter, number 3, to set his cut very quickly and make a low cut to the basket. What we want to do is take B away from the screener to the cutter going toward the basket. 4 has set up his back screen. As A moves into it, and B moves with 3's cut, 4 then we think has an option and a very good opportunity of coming back toward the basketball, receiving the ball in position for perhaps a shot or a thrust to the basket. Both in the down screen and the back screen, we feel that a low cut by the cutter is going to do a lot to free the screener. However, we can also do the same thing with the back cut in terms of using a slip screen that we did with the low cut. Here, the cutter is going to come over the top, bringing the defensive man with him to take away the cut. The screener then simply, on 3's move over the top, spins, going to the basket, trying to keep A on his backside away from the ball as he does so. 2 options against the switch of the back screen. Either can be very effective. Our basic idea of utilizing a low cut against the switch is a part of our counter to switching of the cross screen, just as it is to switching either the down screen or the back screen. Here, our cutter number 3 is going to come off with a low cut. First of all, perhaps just making a quick set to bring this man up a little higher. Our thought here is that as the switch occurs, A takes away the cut, 4 can then spin on B and step back to receive the basketball. The low cut sets up the movement by the screener, who again is the primary target of the passer, not the cutter. Our basic teaching device at either the offensive end or the defensive end of the floor is the part-whole method. We try to break our offense down into parts. 1-man parts, 2-man parts, 3, 4, and put it all together as the 5-man whole of our offense, whether that offense is against man-to-man or against the zone. We do the same thing with our defense, trying to break it down into the 1-man components all the way up to the 5-man whole. In all of our work on cutting and screening, we use part methods in teaching the cut and the screen before we put it together into the 5-man whole. We also start out with specific cuts and screens in our drill. We'll now go into those part methods that we use for teaching proper cutting and screening. The first drill is a simple 2-man drill. We've already established the proper screening angle with the screener inside of the cutter. The cutter has room to set up the cut and make the cut. I use X because X can be one of 3 people. He can be a manager, a coach, or another player. 2 sets the screen, 3 comes off of it, receives the ball from X, sets up in position to take the shot or make the drive to the basket. Now, there are 2 things that can be added to this basic 2-on-nobody drill. The first of these is a defensive man on the cutter. When we put a defensive man on the cutter, we can tell that defensive man to handle the screen in a particular way. Coming into the screen, fighting through the screen, or going behind the screen. This means that we will be working on any one of those 3 options against the defensive man in a down screen situation. Then we can allow the defensive man to fight the screen any way he wants. And here, not only does the cutter have to set up the screen, but he has to read what the defensive man is doing against that screen. You've got to keep in mind that whenever you set up a drill, you, to a great extent, are doing the recognition work for your players. In this two-man drill, we are recognizing that the screener be inside the cutter be outside the screen, and we can even tell the defensive man what we want him to do. But then as we give the defensive man the option of playing the screen anyway, we're now setting it up so that the cutter has to recognize what it is that the defensive man is doing. We bring reading into play in this case. The third thing that we can do then with this two-man situation is put a defensive man on the screener. That defensive man can help with the cutter, or if we want him to, can switch to the cutter, and now we work our options against switching defense. The screener now is also required to read the defense. As he sets the screen, he's got to have his head turned in such a way that as he sets the screen, he can see what that defensive man is doing. If the defensive man makes a move toward the cutter, now the screener has to slip the screen, going to the basket, in a position to receive the pass rather than the pass going to the cutter. So out of a simple two-on-nobody drill, we can cover, by adding a defensive man playing the cutter and a defensive man playing the screener, everything that will take place in a two-man situation involving the down screen in our offense. Another thing that we can do in this same drill is start the potential screener to the outside. We move him to the outside, we move the cutter to the inside, and now they have to make an adjustment. The top man can dribble the ball toward the top of the key, make his pass, while the man we have moved into the lane now steps to the outside. And here we have set up the proper screening angle that we want to utilize in the down screen. In all of our drill work, we'll start out working on one side of the floor. And if we have 5 minutes allotted for a particular drill, such as the down screen, we'll go 2.5 minutes, and then we move it to the other side of the floor. So the players have an opportunity to work our cutting and screening action on both sides of the basket. Our back screen series is set up exactly like our down screen series. We start out with 2 offensive players and no defense. The pass is made reversing the ball back toward the top of the key. The inside man steps out to establish back screening position. The cutter sets up his cut, setting high, going low, or setting low, coming high to receive the pass from the feeder on top. We think it's important to work 2 on nobody through 5 on nobody, simply to establish the timing between the screener and the cutter in all of the screening and cutting that we do. In this particular sequence, we now add a defensive man to the cutter. The first defensive man we add is always to the cutter because it is most important. In fact, it's imperative that the cutter read that defensive man in order to make the proper cut. We can start out by setting him high and going low, or vice versa, setting him low and coming high. Again, we've done the recognition for the cutter. What we want to get to very quickly is allowing the defensive man on 3, put A in here on 3, allowing him to play this as best he can with the cutter reading what he does and making the cut that he thinks will best enable him to get free for the pass. Then we can add a defensive man to the screener. This puts the screener in a position where he once again has to read what is happening. If on a low cut, the defensive man playing the screener moves toward that low cutter, the screener has immediately got to step toward the basketball. If we are allowing the defense to switch and the same action takes place, the defensive man B moving toward the cutter, then the screener steps back to the basketball. So in our back screen situation, we can start from 2 on nobody for timing purposes, building through 2 on 2, where both the cutter and the screener must read the defense for this to be successful. The cross-screen sequence, again we start out with 2 on nobody. The screener moves into position to set the screen. He'll set it at either a high angle or a low angle. The cutter will read the angle of the screen being set and make the appropriate cut. We use 2 people here handling the basketball so that we move the ball from the cutter toward the screen. Now we can add a defensive man to the cutter. He can play high or low, or play it in the best way possible, which again requires the cutter to read what the defensive man is doing. We can then put a defensive man on the screener, which sets up both help and switch possibilities that the screener also has to read. Here, going from 2 on nobody to 2 on 2 with the cross screen, we'll establish every single thing that can take place defensively as well as offensively in our cross screen situation. An option that we can begin to use in our 2 on 2 cross screening setup is the one that I have drawn here on the board. The defensive man playing the cutter moves very quickly to get underneath the screen. The cutter simply steps up on the lane to what amounts to a weak side post position for the pass coming over the top to him in a shooting position. This is a holdover from our California reverse action series, and one that we keep in all of our motion offense simply because it is just as effective here as it was when we ran Pete Newell's offense several years ago. The cutter simply reads the defensive man moving too quickly toward the ball and pops back and in a position for the 15 or 16 foot jump shot. Our next step from the 2 on 2 work that we've described is to put as much reading as possible into a 2 on 2 situation. As we've said, it's so important that we're playing the defense, not watching the basketball, that we're paying attention to position, not just my position as a cutter or my position as a screener, but the position of other people on the floor as well. Here, we have the ball being brought into offensive operating area in a 2-on-2 situation. The pass is made to the manager, the coach, the other player. Here we have an angle that would be conducive to a down screen opportunity. If 4 comes out and receives the basketball, he may or may not have the shot. 2 after the screen may move into the post. 2 may pop to the outside. Let's say that he does pop to the outside. 4 doesn't get the ball. The pass is made to 2. 2 looks to punch the ball now to 4 in the post area. Can't do so. Throws it back on top, and we have a back screen situation. So now what we're saying is we're going to play ball side 2-on-2. And you have to recognize whether it's a down screen or a back screen. And in recognizing which screen it is that we want to use, you have to read the defense to then make the proper cut. So now we're working on the basic fundamentals of cutting and screening, as well as the very most basic thing to good offensive play, at least in our opinion, and that's reading the defensive man in a 2-on-2 situation where we have not set up any particular kind of movement. We can use a 2-on-2 sequence in the post area that will incorporate a great deal of reading as well as the basic fundamental play of both cutting and passing. We start out with the ball in the hands of a coach at the top of the key. He can move to either side. Let's say he chooses to come to 5 sides. This sets up 5 as the screener. He may try to get post position. We obviously want A to prevent that from happening. 5 then moves across to set the screen. 4 has stepped 6 to 8 feet off the line to set up his cut. Everything that we can do in a cross screen situation is going to be available to us now. The defense is going to handle it the best way it possibly can without switching. In any of our 2-on-2 work, we are going to tell the defense whether or not to switch, at least to start with. And then we, on occasion, will leave it up to the defense to switch when or in those situations that it thinks it should. But we have to be very careful here because in our own defensive play, we don't believe in allowing the players to switch on their own by calling it out. All of our switching is done by setting it up in preparation for games or in particular defensive situations that we always switch. We never allow the players to determine a switch. So in working against the switch, we have to be very careful about this particular fact as it pertains to our defensive play. Each of the drills that we're working here offensively with screening and cutting becomes a defensive drill for us as well. I'm often asked, how much time do you spend on defense and how much time do you spend on offense? Well, I think we spend the same amount of time on offense that we spend on defense because our drills have both an offensive quality as well as a defensive quality. Now, obviously, when we only have one defensive man in a drill, the emphasis is on offense. Or when we're 2-on-0 or 3-on-0 up to 5 on nobody, we're working entirely on offense. But in almost all that we do, the defensive emphasis in a drill is the same as the offense.
Come on, Mike. Come on, Mike. Come on, Mike, it's hard. Get up with it. That's better. Let's try it.
mentioned earlier that we like to move our drill work from one side of the floor to the other. We also like to change positions with our drills. An example would be here in our 2-on-2 post drill. We have one postman high, the other one low. If we take the ball to the low side, we're now going to screen up with a cut to the basket, and if we take it to the high side, we now have put a down screen with the low postman coming into the lane off that particular screen. In addition to setting up those movements that we have in the cross screen is accomplished by using a high post and a low post in our 2-on-2 post play. A second example of changing the position of the drill is setting up a back screen drill from on top. The pass is made, and now the cut is made off the postman toward the basket from on top rather than from on the side. And we can do the same thing with this drill that we do with any of the others. We can go 2 on nobody, a defense on the cutter, a defense on both the cutter and the screener, making it a 2-on-2 situation. The key here is that we have kept the same action, the back screen, the cut, but have changed the position on the floor. We think it's important that you move your action to different spots on the floor, covering those areas where any specific action can take place during the playing of a game. Before we go on to our 3-man sequences, I think it would be appropriate to talk about spacing, so you'll have an idea as to just what we want to be able to do and how we want to be able to set up our people in terms of relationship of one to the other in 3 to 5-man sequences within the scope of our offense. I've placed a 5-man offense here on the board. Usually, we fill 2 post positions and 3 perimeter positions in the offensive alignment that we simply call regular. This is the alignment from which all other alignments that we use come. We think that we have a perimeter game and an inside game, but we're going to talk about spacing here. We want, as a distance between all players, approximately 15 to 18 feet. We want 15 to 18 feet from the side to the post, from the top to the side, from the top to the top, and from the top to the post. We stretch it a little bit here, perhaps, to maybe 22 or 23 feet, depending on how deep we penetrate from the guard spot. Anytime we make a cut, we go through, we set a screen, we make a movement, it's important that we reestablish 15 to 18 foot spacing. Now, we will constantly be breaking that spacing and just as constantly moving back into that spacing. We feel that 15 to 18 feet gives us the absolute best opportunity to pass the basketball from one player to another, a short distance, a crisp, sharp pass. It gives us the best distance from which to set up and make the cut, as well as establishing good screening position. Whatever we're doing in whatever alignment we have, the first thing we want to make sure is that we start from and work to maintain proper spacing. When we talk about spacing, it's also very important that we talk about the baseline. The baseline can often be the most effective defensive player in the game against motion offense. Now, I have diagrammed, as my artistic abilities permit me to do so, an outline that we put on our playing floor that you'll see in actuality in just a moment. We use this outline taped on the floor at both ends for every practice session we have from the first practice until the last practice. The key line for us when talking about getting off or above the baseline is this line that goes through where the old dotted line in the lane used to be, all the way across the floor parallel to the baseline. Now, except for a man in the low post, we want our offense to be run above this line. If a player makes a cut below that line, we then want him to return to the offense above the line. It's imperative in offensive movement that a cutter be able to move both toward the basketball and toward the basket. If a cutter gets down against the baseline, the only cut he has is toward the basketball, the baseline eliminating any cut toward the basket, and this makes him just a much easier offensive player to guard. A key phrase in teaching kids offensive movement is, I think, be hard to guard. The harder you are to guard, the better you're going to be offensively. And while we're talking about keeping our offense above this line, with the exception of a posting player, I'll go through the other lines that we use on the floor for offensive purposes. These two boxed areas show where we would like to have our low post man set up. This gives him a chance to go both baseline and to the middle. If he gets any lower than this, he has no chance of going to the baseline. If he gets any higher than this, he may take himself out of an effective area in regard to taking the ball to the basket. We want lateral spacing to our offense. These two lines are 16 feet from the basket. We want our offense to utilize the width of the floor. These lines are both important in our attack against man-to-man defense as well as against zone. We want to use the floor from side to side, spreading both defenses, man-to-man and zone. Against the man-to-man defense, we want a cutter going to the bucket, coming out the other side, not only to get above this line, but to get outside this one. When playing against the zone, if we take the ball to one side of the zone, when we reverse it, we want to do so to people playing outside this line, set up in good shot position. Again, this line is 16 feet. And if the ball is reversed quickly to a man in this position, he becomes an immediate scoring threat. And now the zone or help side recovery and man-to-man defense has got to get into him quickly, setting up possibilities for the shot fake, the pass fake, penetration that creates other opportunities. But back to the line parallel to the baseline. If we can work to keep our offense above this line, then we're going to be able to utilize our 15 to 18 foot spacing as well as the distance from the set of our offense to the baseline to get the kind of cutting and screening both toward the basket and toward the ball that we have to make motion offense effective. In setting up our offensive movement, there are 7 things that a passer can do after getting rid of the basketball. And I'll go through those 7 things here. The pass is made from 2 to 3. Number 1, he could go behind and get the ball back. Number 2, he could set a screen. Number 3, he can make an inside cut to the baseline. Number 4, he could make a cut to the basket. Number 5, he could go away to screen. Number 6, he could start away and replace himself. Or number 7, he could just stand right where he is. Now, there are 3 of these cuts that we'd like to eliminate. First of all, we don't want the man going behind to get the ball back. I really believe that this is an ineffective offensive move and one that puts too much defense on the basketball. The same is true of following the pass to screen for the ball. And the third thing we want to eliminate is standing. So there are 4 basic things that we want our passes to do after delivering the basketball. Inside cut, cut to the basket, go away to screen, or cut away and come back to replace yourself. We then try to put these cuts into play with everything that we do, beginning with 3 on nobody, working right through 5 on 5. From 2-on-2 drill work, we can go into 3-man situations. Here we have a ball side 3-man situation. We're going to stay on this side and work on the timing of everything that can be done here. Pass to the side, an inside cut. A pass to the side, start away and replace yourself. A pass to the side, a cut off a back pick to the basket. If we've made an inside cut, we may hit the post man, back cut. We may slide into the low post and try and make the feed. We can bring the ball across the top, make the pass to our unguarded player, manager, or coach, and a down screen. What we are doing with 3 players is now setting up every possible cut or movement that can take place on the ball side of our offense. We set up specific cuts, 3 on nobody, saying as an example that we'll make the pass, inside cut, back pick, down screen, or any particular move that we want to show our players that can be made out of this 3-man ball side setup. Here again, when we set up the move, we're working on timing between the cutting and the screening rather than the recognition or the reading of the defense. Now, when we put in 3 defensive players, we're adding reading to what we're doing offensively. If we get against good pressure, we can start by bringing the ball into play with 3 and 5 in a stack. Stacks, as you'll see, are a basic point in our breaking half-court pressure in man-to-man defense. We set up a 2-man stack, either 3 or 5 steps to the outside with the other remaining on the post. We either make the pass to the side, to the post, or hit our open man, and then we read, cut, and screen. 3-on-3 ball side is a very effective way for us to incorporate perimeter play from the top, the side, and the post man into the offensive situations that can be created on the ball side. Again, everything that can be done in this 3-man situation is available to us. We can allow the defense to switch if we want to. We can set the defense up so that they can't switch, depending upon what we're going to be playing against in the next ball game, or determined by what we want to work on in any given practice situation. 3-on-3 with an open release man. The release man allows the offense to continue moving with the cutting and screening, not being dependent on people getting open to handle the ball. It gives the offense an advantage that it won't have in a ball game, but yet using this release man is an excellent teaching device for the movement in 3-man situations offensively, or 2-man or 4-man, as we'll show later.
Good. Go hard, David. Good. How about this? Hit yourself. Back there. Good. There it is. Come on, Brad. Right there. Go good. Step up high there. Good. Good. Next team. Hey, Ricky. Come up. Good.
From 3-on-3 ball side, we can move into a 3-on-nobody perimeter situation where we can pass, inside cut, pass, screen away, pass, cut to the basket, do all of the things that are available to us on the perimeter, maintaining our 15 to 18-foot spacing. And with 3-on-nobody, we're going to be moving from one side of the floor to the other. We'll be playing the entire perimeter. The particular cutting that we do will set up or establish the side of the floor that we'll be operating on offensively. And that, through cutting and movement of the basketball, can quickly change from one side to the other. 3-on-nobody gives us a look at our timing and the options that are available in sequence to our people on the perimeter. We can then add 3 defensive men to this, making it a 3-on-3 situation, where, as in all cases, we are now requiring that the offensive men have to read the defensive men, not watching the basketball, but reading what it is that not only the defensive man playing each is doing, but what the defensive men playing their teammates are doing. This brings about the coordinated movement, cutting and screening, as well as the movement of the basketball that we have to have in our offensive play on the perimeter. Now, if we want to give the offense a little bit of an advantage, we put our release man again in at the high post. This release man is available for a pass, and then we'll cut and screen depending upon where our 3 men find themselves on the perimeter. The unguarded release man is obviously an advantage to the offense, as we've already mentioned. Yet, this unguarded release man makes it very tough on the defensive people. And we think this not only becomes a very good teaching device or an aid to our offensive movement, but is an excellent thing to use to put pressure on our defensive people. There will always be a release for the ball, and the defensive people have to play the movement, helping and recovering. All that we need to do in defensive play is incorporated in this work. But our primary emphasis is on the cutting, the screening, and the movement of our perimeter players. We at times will have our inside players working 3-on-3 perimeter play. We'll also have our perimeter people at times working 3-on-3 inside. while we're working 3-on-3 perimeter play at one end of the floor, in all probability, at the other end of the floor, we're working 3-on-3 or 3-on-nobody, setting up all of the movements, cutting and screening, that are a part of our inside game. Here, we have 2 feeders or release people on top, moving from side to side. I've placed the 3 inside offensive players in a stack and a man opposite. Now, we can start from any position. We could move this man to the top of the key. Now we have a high post and a stack. We can take a man out of the low stack and bring him high. We could take these 2 players and move them to a wide 3-man inside situation. We'll again start out with 3-on-nobody in whatever set we use to initiate this 3-on-nobody situation for the purpose of timing with our cutting and screening. Then we add 3 defensive players so that we are now required to read the defense and set up our cuts and screens according to what the defense allows or enables us to do. When we have a 3-on-3 inside setup in our offense, we want our players to come down in different positions each time. If we just take one person from among these 3, let's say it's number 3, and tell him to make sure he's in a different position every time down the court, then this changes the initial look that the defense sees to our offense. I think it's important that the defense cannot keep track of the offensive players. We want them going to different spots and different positions regardless of the alignment that we use. 3-on-3 inside play helps us with our screening, our cutting, our inside spacing. We found that by just using this as a basic drill for teaching inside movement, it was very difficult for the 3 defensive men to keep track of 3 cutting, screening offensive men through either straight defense or switching. When we allowed the defense to switch, we found that many, many times 2 defenders got hung up on the same cutting offensive man, leaving a man open within this 3-on-3 movement. Because of the difficulty the defense had with this particular drill, we decided that this had to become an offensive set for us. And you'll see this when we talk about our triangle offense. The first thing that we do to combine our inside and outside play without limiting the players to 1/2 the floor is utilizing the setup that I have here on the board. We call it 3-on-3 and a postman. These 3 perimeter players are going to play all over the perimeter from corner to corner, maintaining the 15 to 18 foot spacing. That's a very basic part of our man-to-man offense. The postman is not going to back screen, nor are the perimeter players going to down screen for the postman. The postman has the freedom of movement anywhere in the post. He simply is working to get open so the perimeter men can punch the ball inside to him. There are 3 things that we will be doing on the perimeter. 1 could be an inside cut, 2, a screen away, or 3, pass and replace yourself. And our perimeter men will be doing these 3 things as They are moving the basketball and working to take the ball inside to the postman. Now, a very, very important part of motion offense is understanding that the players do not move according to what the basketball does. The basketball moves according to what the players are doing. In other words, if the basketball is being dribbled in this direction and the postman spins out of the post and comes opposite in such a way that he's going to be open, then the ball has to be reversed and we look to make the feed inside. It's important to teach players to take the ball to the action. In pattern offense, the action always goes toward the basketball. A bounce pass indicates one kind of action. An air pass, another kind of action. A pass and screen away, a third kind of action. Offensive keys. Offensive keys really stereotype, in our opinion, what the offense is going to do. If the ball reacts to the action, then there is no stereotyped offensive movement. The man with the basketball has constantly got to be alert to what is happening around the floor offensively so that the ball can be moved into position to take advantage of a man getting open through whatever action has been used. And again, this is the first setup that we use for combining inside play with our outside play. We don't have any screening between the two. We have movement in the post, movement on the perimeter, looking to get the ball inside. When we set this up in practice, we have a postman take 2 times, then a second postman comes in against another defensive man, and we run it 2 more times, then we switch from red to white. In 3-on-3 in a postman, we have some obvious restrictions that we have worked into what we are doing. The first thing that we use in developing our man-to-man offense, where there are no restrictions, is 4-on-4. We set up a 4-on-4 situation where all 4 positions are interchangeable. Before we show the 4-on-4, however, I would like to discuss quickly the rules that we use in our play against man-to-man defense. The first of those rules, spacing, we've already discussed at length. Secondly, we simply tell our players, if there's a man below you, go screen. Anytime you're coming down the floor and you see that there is a man below you, just go down and set a screen. And that's an excellent way for us to get our offense started. From setting the down screen, we can also say that if you have come into a post position and there is a man outside you, set a back screen. And in each of these 2 ways, we are getting motion started before the ball is really into a close proximity to the inside part of our offense. We feel that offensive motion should begin as the ball is coming across midcourt. We want our offense started long before a guard to forward pass is made. Practically all pattern offense is initiated by a pass from a guard to a forward or a guard to the post, and movement does not start until then. But keep in mind that a basic point for us is the ball has to go where the action is. And we want that action taking place as the ball is being brought across midcourt. All right, another very important rule for us, anytime a player on the perimeter receives a pass, let's say that a pass is made from 1 to 2, the player receiving the pass faces the basket for a 2 count. We feel that when the player gets the basketball, he turns, he faces the basket, Now he can see everything that's taking place. Now he has a chance to take the ball to that point of action that we've been discussing. If he just catches the basketball and puts it on the dribble or catches it and passes it, he may overlook something that's taking place where we have an open man away from the basketball. The 2 count goes through a lot of things that we do in our offensive work against man-to-man defense, yet in no place is it more important than facing the basket. Now, we make one allowance with the 2 cut on the or the 2 count on the perimeter. We say that if you receive a pass knowing that a man is open for the shot or open with a cut going to the basket, immediately make that pass to the open man. But if you don't know that a man is getting open at that precise moment, the 2 count, look at the basket, and then take the ball where the action is occurring. In extending the 2 count, we say that any time a player moves into a posting position, now I have him coming across the lane, it could be from high to low, it could be from low to high. Anytime he moves into a posting position, he holds that position for a count of 2. He posts 1,001, 1,002. If we can't get the ball to a posting player in that 2 count, then that player is going to move and set a screen away or assume another position in our offense, and then we will continue with the movement in our offense. The 2 count is also utilized in all of our screening. In a down screen situation such as we have here, we want the screener to set the screen and hold for a count of 2, 1,001, 1,002. That gives the cutter a chance to clear the screen and also enables then the screener to pop back into position and receive the ball if both defensive players, at least momentarily, go with the cutter. The exact same situation would exist in a back screen situation. Set the screen, the cut is made, we hold the screen for a count of 2. The cutter can clear the screener then can pop back and receive the basketball. Setting up the count of 2 throughout what we're doing offensively with our movement really gives us the kind of rhythm that I think enables us to take advantage of what's there. If nothing is there, we can then move the ball someplace else and see what action is occurring at another spot on the floor. Our next rule is fill the high post when it's open. This big area that I've circled, going down a little bit below the foul line and extending a little bit above the top of the key, is what we are referring to when we say high post. We feel that any time you can get the ball into this area, there are a lot of things that can happen from it. Obviously, you can take it to the left, you can take it to the right, you can penetrate to the bucket, you can pass and screen away, pass an inside cut. The very boundaries of the court, we feel, the baseline and the sideline, if the ball is against the sideline or the baseline, then there is a limit as to what can be done with the basketball. But there is no limit in the high post area. Therefore, whenever this area is vacant, we want the closest player moving into the high post area so we can center the ball and then have all of the options that are available to our offense going toward both sides of the court as well as penetrating toward the basket. Fill the high post whenever it's vacant. Our next rule is don't make 2 consecutive cuts in the same direction. Here we show 1 hitting 2 and making a cut off the post or an inside cut to the baseline. 2 hits 3 and makes the same cut down on the baseline. This just takes 2 of our 5 players and puts them in a small area where they can easily be guarded. And then we add a 3rd player to it, and we don't have the kind of spacing that we want around the floor. This is all part of reading, offensively and defensively. When 2 receives the ball, he makes his pass, also paying attention to what 1 does. If 1 makes this particular cut to the baseline, then the options that are open for 2 are these. 1, screen away. 2, cut to the basket. And 3, replace himself for a return pass from 3. 2 consecutive cuts in the same direction really destroys the spacing that's absolutely essential to good cutting and screening that results in good shot. The last of our basic rules against man-to-man defense is don't make a cut into an occupied post position. Here we have the ball on the side in position to be fed into the postman. I think one of the great mistakes that can be made offensively against any kind of defense really is an anxious player away from the ball moving across the lane into a position that's already occupied. It's as though he doesn't see somebody posted. And this rule, don't make a cut into an occupied post area, we think not only keeps the kind of spacing that we want, but eliminates the congestion that can result from too many people in the post area. He's got to have a little bit of patience over here. Number 5 is waiting with the 2 count, 1,001, 1,002. He doesn't get the ball, he may come across and set a cross screen. He may move out of the post. And now the new man has an opportunity to slide into an open post position. Paying attention to what each other is doing is a very key point in teaching offensive play against man-to-man defense. Now we've gone through the basic rules of play that we try to put into effect against man-to-man defense. Keep one thing in mind with rules. The more rules that you have, the more closely your offense is going to resemble pattern offense. The more rules that you put into it, the more defined the offense becomes, the more predictable it is. These few rules that we have gone over form the basis for our player judgments in going against man-to-man defense, and we feel set our offense up in such a way that it is not a stereotyped, predictable offense. In all of our work thus far, we have, either because of the setup that's been used, like 3-on-3 ball side or 2-on-2 cross screen, we have set certain limitations on the player's movement in whatever drill it is that we've been working on to this point. Now, we're going to set a 4-on-4 situation on the board that will not have any inherent restrictions, nor will we place, as coaches, any limitations on what is being done. We like 4-on-4 setups because, first of all, from an offensive standpoint, using just 4 people requires each player to play at all spots on the floor. Even if we have a postman, a center, who we're not going to allow to come out of the basic posting area, we still feel in practice situations it will help him tremendously with movement and ball handling skills if he is required to play anywhere on the court. Also, from a defensive standpoint, and remember, we've said that our drills have got to have a defensive value as well as an offensive value for them to be effective in our system. From a defensive point of view, it's much tougher to cover 4 people with the space available to those 4 offensive players than it is to cover 5. So we think we get the advantage offensively of everyone playing all over the court, and defensively the advantage of making it more difficult in 4-on-4 play than 5-on-5 would be. Now, in a 4-on-4 setup, I have a box here, obviously, but we could move 3 and 4 into a stack position on the high post. They could stack along the lane. We could have a 3-man stack and 1 guard bring the ball into play. We can do anything with 4-on-4 that we're going to be able to do in any of the 5-on-5 alignments that we use. In 4-on-4, we are now going to put into play the rules that we have discussed. Not only the rules, but the fundamentals that we have been working on to execute our offense. 4-on-4 involves reading the defense, reacting to what the defense allows us to do, seeing the correct option, taking the ball in the proper direction, making sure that the ball moves toward the action. This, then, is how we're going to play basketball against man-to-man defense, with the exception of the 5-man alignments that we will use and discuss momentarily. This is our basketball. And each night, we're going to work on all of the things that we have discussed thus far in a 4-on-4 situation, which encompasses all of our fundamental work as well as requiring the players to read the defense. We feel there's a real necessity not only to work on basic fundamentals from day to day, and obviously we can't work on every single fundamental every day. That's where 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 play comes to help us with the development of fundamental play. We'll set up our practice schedule and work on 2 or 3 basic fundamental concepts today and 2 or 3 more tomorrow. But each day we feel it's important that we work on cutting and screening, because they are such basic parts of anything that we do offensively. Another thing we believe is important in setting up the development of our offensive play is not just simply working on fundamentals day after day, gradually building into 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 play. We feel the very first day of practice, for us October 15th, it's important to be working on 4-on-4 and 5-on-5 as we are introducing and working on the fundamental aspects of our play. We want our players not only to work on fundamental execution, but we want them to start learning to read how that fundamental execution is put into play against 4- and 5-man defense. It's important that we are learning to read the defense on the first day of practice, as it is important that we are learning to execute our basic fundamentals. There are 7 different 5-man alignments that we can use to utilize the fundamental concepts and rules of motion offense. All of these alignments start or come from our basic regular offensive alignment. Regular offense involves 3 perimeter players, a man in the high post area, and a postman or a center. Now, we are assuming in regular offense that we have a center who will be confined to the normal posting area. Our rule for center play is that he does not go anywhere in our offense that he can't score from. So when he sets a back pick, it has to be set at a position from which he can hit the jump shot if he receives the ball in that spot. Our 3 perimeter spots are interchangeable with the 4th spot in our regular offense. We expect these 4 people to be able to play anywhere. They can involve themselves with the postman, they can be posting, or they can be executing the maneuvers and motions that we have in our perimeter play. Regular offense would be then the offense that we would probably use the greatest percentage of time, regardless of the personnel that we might have on any given team. We can take advantage of everything that our offense allows. The key here is that there is an interchange with 4 people. So it's possible for us to take anybody into post play or anyone on the perimeter, with the exception of this center, who we have determined is a primary post player. He's either not quick enough or doesn't shoot well enough or handle the ball well enough to be able to be utilized out on the perimeter play. it's very simple for us to get into the second of these 7 alignments. From regular offense, we go to 5-man motion. In 5-man motion, our setup is exactly the same, except now we don't have a permanent postman. We have a team without a center. We have a team where everyone can play all positions. Now we have no limitations on who can be in the perimeter or who can be in the post. This sometimes happens with the very same team. We have had teams where there was a permanent postman, a very important part of our offensive play, utilizing regular offense with him. Yet if he got in foul trouble or for whatever reason we made a substitution taking him out of the ball game, we might often put in a forward in his place, a guy that was capable of playing on the perimeter. Now we can go to 5-man motion where everybody can play in every spot. These are the first 2 alignments that we used when we started developing motion offense 15 years ago.
Get wider, get higher, Rick. Good, good. Back out, watch your head. Got you. Go down, off there. Come on, back. Get on top. That's it, man. Here you go, Rick. You ready? Go, big arm. It's a lob to give. Screen on Rick. Let's go there. Let's go there. Down, down. Good. Oh, where's the help?
The third basic alignment for us is post-exchange. You can see that the basic setup looks exactly like the alignment we would be using in either regular offense or 5-man motion. The key in any alignment is, first of all, execution of the basic fundamentals, and secondly, the spacing, 15 to 18 feet, that's necessary for us to get the right cuts and the proper screening angle. Now, what we do in post-exchange is say that we have 2 post players that are going to work with each other. They can cross-screen, they can down-screen, they can up-screen. If you'll think back a moment, this was a very basic drill for us in the development of inside play. 2-on-2 in the post. We simply combine 2-on-2 in the post with a 3-on-3 perimeter drill that we've also already discussed into a 5-man offensive set post-exchange. The 3 perimeter players are working with themselves. Pass, inside cut. Pass, screen away. Pass, replace yourself. The 3 perimeter players will work from side to side, almost exactly as they were doing in our drill 3-on-3 and a postman, except now, instead of 1 post player, we have 2 post players. If the ball is brought toward you, you are a screener. If the ball is taken away from you, you are going to be a cutter. A basic tenet of offensive play for us against man-to-man defense using any of the alignments that we might use. Now, if we find that we have other players who are capable of playing in the post and a postman who is also capable of playing on the perimeter, we add an additional thing to post-exchange. This postman can come out and set a back pick for a perimeter player who now joins with the permanent postman in a post-exchange movement with 4 going to the perimeter with the other 2 perimeter players. This alignment stays this way until the new post player backpicks somebody else into post-exchange. If we have 2 permanent post people, 2 players that are very effective for us, we utilize them in a strict post-exchange setup with no interchange between the perimeter and the post play.
Go in. Straight for shot. Move, Lyman. Don't just stand there. Nice job, man. Get up to that, Dino. Yeah. Good. Come on, Red. Come on, Red. Block. Move. Come on, man. That's going on 55. Forward. Come on, forward. There it is. Forward. Now get
From post exchange with 2 inside players and 3 perimeter players, we move on to our next alignment, which we call triangle. It simply is an inversion of post exchange. We now have 3 inside players and 2 perimeter players. Let's take our perimeter players first of all. They're going to maintain the spacing, 15 to 18 feet, moving anywhere around the perimeter. Now, it would be possible for a pass to be made and an inside cut. But most of what we will be doing with these 2 perimeter players is pass, move, replace yourself. Start away, come back. Just moving that defensive man enough so that we can pop back and get a release, and then maybe with the dribble take the ball to a little bit different angle. The responsibility for our perimeter players is to make sure that they are putting the ball into a position that can take advantage of whatever action we have here on the inside. Now, we want to maintain that same 15 to 18 foot spacing with our inside people. However, with triangle, we at times may get a double screen. 4 may come down, 3 may come down, 5 works off of it. When this happens, we always want the top man in a double screen popping back towards the basketball. 3-on-3 was a basic inside drill for us when we were working on the development of our inside game. 2-on-2 was a basic drill for us in the development of our outside or perimeter play. Now, we simply are combining those 2 drills into a 5-man offense. We can set up a stack situation where we're playing out of a stack, being able to screen into the stack, screen down, giving him an option of coming off either low or high. Again, what is a double screen will be in effect out of a stack situation, or can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case. We may get a situation where the top man flashes high, and as he does so, this screen is set and the cut is made here, the pass comes in, and now we can look at either one of those 2 cutters. A basic thought in triangle is this: when the ball goes inside, the other 2 players work an action between themselves, giving the man with the ball an opportunity not only to score with it, but to take advantage of the motion between the other 2. If there is a defensive man that's dropping back into any situation here in triangle, that offensive man slides into an open position, and we're looking to put the ball back out to him in a spot where he might have the shot. The triangular motion inside that we've just discussed involved 3 players working around the lane. We call this triangle tight. Now, we move 2 players off the lane, 10 to 12 feet, and play the 3rd player on a medium to a high post. We simply call this triangle spread. And now we have an opportunity to set some back picks with cuts being made to the basket. We can hit a man coming up on the high post and get a back cut without a screen. We're just simply spreading the defense a little bit wider. Again, our 2 people on the perimeter have the responsibility of moving the ball into position to take advantage of the openings created for good shots by inside action. We found that post-exchange, 2 players inside puts a burden on the defense if we play, as an example, a guard inside with a postman. Now it's difficult to switch it because of the mismatches that might take place. They have to switch a guard to our center. Size and strength mismatch. They have to switch a center to our guard. A mismatch in quickness. That's why we want to be able to use alignments to take advantage of anything that might happen. We can take a guard who's in foul trouble and take him inside in post-exchange. Even better is to take that guy who's in foul trouble or who is a relatively weak defensive player inside in either tight or spread triangle. We found over the years that there are defensive teams that can do a good job adjusting and switching between 2 guys in the post. But even the best defensive team has a very, very difficult time switching with 3 people cutting, moving, and screening in the post. We can take advantage of the defense with 3 people in the post cutting and moving to a greater extent than we can with 2 people. Triangle has been something that we've always used no matter what our personnel might be, because we think it's so important to have it in our offensive approach. Our next 5-man alignment we refer to as high. You can see from where I have them set here on the board, everyone is above the foul line or foul line extended. And we are going to return to those positions. We might make a back pick and a cut to the basket. We might screen out and cut to the basket. But when we do so and cut into the lane, we want those cutters coming back out to fill these 4 perimeter spots. Usually, we want a player in this position who can handle the basketball and can also take the ball to the basket. Sometimes this means that we're not going to be able to utilize our center in this spot. We'll have to take him out of the ball game and use a forward here on the high post. But when we do have a center that can handle the basketball, we always use him in this position. Now, an advantage of bringing another player into this position than our center is that the opposing center is now going to have to play somebody that might be much quicker than he is. We're utilizing our high offense in 2 areas. Number 1, as a delay game where we have a lead, we want to run a little time off the clock, 20, 30 seconds, always trying to get a layup. And our rule here is a layup off the pass, unless it's a direct 1-2 dribble drive to the basket. That's it. We don't want the ball put on the floor any more than 2 times by a single player when we're in high offense. So running off time, using the clock, working to get a layup, high offense can be very effective for us in this regard. Secondly, when we're playing against a team that pressures well and overplays passing lanes, we can break out of a stack in the middle into high positions, and now we have a chance for good back cut situations off the dribble. We can hit the high post and get a back cut to the basket in an attempt to loosen up the offense. We also have very good chances to set back screens, and as we get things loosened for our offense, the defense has to back away just a little bit, giving us more room. We have thus far shown as 5-man alignments, regular, 5-man motion, post exchange, triangle, and high. Now, those 5 alignments are basic to everything that we do against man-to-man defense. And I believe each team that we've had here at Indiana has utilized each of those 5 basic alignments against man-to-man defense. Now we'll discuss a couple of alignments that can be used in motion offense that are dictated by the kind of personnel that you might have. Although you might find that post exchange or triangle or 5-man motion, because of your personnel, most ideally suits the players that you have on any given team, and therefore would become your primary offense in any given season. The first of the 2 special alignments within the concept of motion offense would be isolating the postman. We set up a postman and give him this area in which to work without any interference whatsoever. Our other 4 players are then involved in 4-man motion above and outside this post area. What we're saying is that we have a very, very good and effective postman. It's going to be very difficult to play against him one-on-one in this area. We're not going to crowd him. He really doesn't need screens. We're going to have him work and move to get open, constantly working, trying to get the ball inside. Everything that we do would be involved with these four people. Screen away, inside cut, start away and replace yourself, all of the screening that we do, but yet we're saying, again, our postman can get open by himself. Let's make it as tough as we can on the defense by isolating him in this situation. We simply call it four-man motion and a post. As you can see, our drill 3-on-3 in a postman leads right in to this kind of offensive alignment in five-man play.
Get wider, get higher, Rick. Good. Back out, watch your health. Got you.
The second special alignment in our motion offense would be utilizing a guard who is an extremely good ball handler and a very, very good penetrator. With this kind of guard, we really don't want him involved in the screening action or cutting through to the basket with everybody else handling the ball about the same amount of time that he does. We want the ball in his hands more than in anyone else's. So we simply invert 4-on-4 in a postman to a guard and four-man motion. Everybody knows that we want the ball in his hands most of the time. He will do a lot of start away and replace himself, coming back to a position where he can get the ball facing the bucket, looking to make a penetrating move, as well as making the pass that gets things started for us offensively. Our other four players will just run our motion, down screen, cross screen, back screen, inside cut, everything that we do, and he will be involved in it to a certain extent. But we have placed a primary emphasis on him handling the basketball, and it's his responsibility to make the passes that lead to shots, and if shots don't occur, get the ball back and get it into other positions, because his ability with the basketball is in itself a very big part of our offense. Certainly, his ability to penetrate with the basketball will create a lot of offensive opportunities for us. A guard and four-man motion.
Come on, Ricky! Start it in, double one. Now time it up. Rick, get it back. Get him, Rick.
In all of our alignments, and in fact, all of our offensive play, regardless of the defense, a basic thought of ours is to keep the ball off the baseline unless the player receiving the pass is in a position to shoot the ball. We don't want a player moving away from the basket to receive the pass in an awkward position. We don't want a player receiving the ball when there isn't anything that he can do with it. We feel defensively that the more that we can get the ball into the corners of the court, the better we're going to be defensively, because the less there is that the offense can do with the basketball. Consequently, in our own offensive play, we don't want to get caught in the corner or on the baseline with the basketball. We want the ball going only to the baseline in any of our offensive alignments when the man receiving it is in position to score, either with the shot or taking it to the basket. When using any of our offensive alignments or in playing 4-on-4, there are restrictions that we can place on our offensive play to emphasize certain points. First of all, we don't want to take a shot in any kind of an offensive situation other than the fast break until we've made 4 passes. We want our players to feel that ours is a 4-pass offense. We feel that in making 4 passes, we're going to reverse the ball at least twice from one side to the other, and this will expose the inside defense to our movement and our screening. We want to try and see if each time down the floor we can get the ball in a position where we have a chance not only at a short shot, but a foul along with it. Once we've explored the defense through 4 passes, then we are looking to develop the shots that we have set up for each of our players through our definition of shot selection. But we basically want to work through 4 passes before taking the jump shot. Now, at any time when we are working any one of our offensive motions, we want to get the layup off the pass. If we can get the layup in 1 pass or 2 passes, then we're always going to try to do so. I think it's very important when you put passing restrictions on your offense that your players know that they are always trying to get the layup. So the first restriction we put on our offense, and can do so with any alignment, as I mentioned, is a number of passes. No shots until 8 passes are made. The players have got to count themselves the 8 passes before a shot can be taken. Now, what we're talking about is a shot other than a layup off the pass, because we are constantly trying to get that particular shot. A way to develop good ball handling, good cutting, and good screening techniques is through the use of numbers of passes. If we make our team run 8 passes before we take the shot, then we've got to do a lot of passing, cutting, and ball handling to get those 8 passes. We have a special drill, 5-on-5, where we don't even try to get a shot other than the layup. We give the offense 2 points if it scores a layup, 1 point if it reaches 8 passes. If the defense gets a deflection of any of those 8 passes, they get a point, and if they get an interception, they get 3 points. We play this game to 10 points, and it's really interesting to see the defense work to get that interception for a 3-pointer that will mean the game to them, or the offense to cut and screen trying to get the basket for 2 points that might mean the win for them. Competitive work in practice such as this, we think, is very important to the development of the competitive instinct that you have to have in play. The next restriction that we might use is saying that only a particular person can shoot the ball. Nobody shoots the ball but Smith. Smith is a very good offensive player for us. He's our leading scorer. Teams are going to be working against him. He's going to be playing against a lot of special defenses. If in practice we have worked where no one but Smith can shoot the ball wherever that might be from, everyone knows that they've got to work to get Smith open. Plus, Smith knows himself that he's got to work to get open because the defense is loaded towards Smith. But while we are saying that only one player can shoot the ball, we are always trying to get the layup. A next restriction that we might use would be allowing 2 players to take the shot. We have 5 guys working to get the shot for our 2 primary scorers. We think this really helps us in utilizing those people who are best scorers and also putting them in a situation where they have to work against loaded defensive play. Another restriction that we place on offensive play could be no dribbling. The ball is brought across midcourt, it's picked up and passed. Nobody then dribbles the basketball. We work to get a shot, a layup or a shot, without the use of the dribble. This does an awful lot to enhance the cutting and the screening necessary to our offensive play. Sometimes players begin to rely on the dribble when they should be relying on cutting and screening instead. We simply take the dribble out of offensive work by, at least in that particular possession or in a series of possessions, not allowing the dribble to be made. You have an offensive postman that's very effective for you. You're going to use him in 4-man motion in a post or post exchange, or you're going to emphasize getting the ball to him regardless of the alignment that you're using. Set up your offense with this restriction. We can't take a shot until Jones touches the ball in the post 3 times. Our postman Jones then has to work to handle the ball 3 times. Our other 4 people, through our motion, cutting and screening, have got to work equally as hard to get the ball into Jones and then allow Jones to release it back out to the perimeter 3 times before we can take the shot. We're working to develop his movement inside, plus our ability at getting the ball inside to a man that's going to be very important to us in our offensive play. Restrictions are very, very important in developing certain points that are important to you with your personnel in whatever offensive alignment you choose to use. And they can be used with every alignment. The last thing that we do with our man-to-man offense is a period that we call change. We have, as our colors, as you can easily see, red and white. Usually our first team is in red, our second team is in white. We might go through anywhere from a 10 to 20 minute period where I call out the possession, and I would do so in this way. Regular offense, that basket. What I've done is say the red team has the ball in our regular offense. It means the white team is on defense in man-to-man because regular is a part of our man-to-man offense. We're going to that basket. Each possession that we have offensively with the red team will then be followed by the white team converting the ball to the other end of the floor. When that possession is completed with the white team having made a basket or the red team getting the ball, and however it does so, I call out the next possession. I may call out triangle or post exchange or high or go back to regular. I may give the white team the basketball, or I may allow the red team to keep it for 2 or 3 possessions or go to the white team for 2 or 3 possessions. This way, we are having the offensive team think from one alignment to the other. Regular offense to triangle, triangle to post exchange, triangle back to regular offense, incorporating high or whatever it is that we're doing. I believe it's very important that we put players in situations where they have to think and react to changes. Basketball is a game of change. The tempo changes, the defense changes, there are changes required in offensive play, and players have got to work at reacting to those changes. We've tried to give you a look at everything that we do in setting up our man-to-man offense. Just as I said that regular offense was the basis for all of our man-to-man play, the fundamentals that we work on and we put together in the development of our motion offense against man-to-man defense carry over into everything that we do offensively. Our zone offense, our press offense, matchup offense, trap offense, whatever it does comes from the development of these basic fundamentals that we've discussed here on Clinic 2. And we will be putting all of those fundamentals together for you in Clinic 3. Thanks for being with us, and good luck to you and your team.